Okay, we're going to start talking about improvising over a new coat of paint, and there's a lot of information here, and this video could get very long, so I'm going to try to be very concise rather than have this drag out because it easily could, as you can see. In new coat of paint, we have these chords. I'm going to assume you're familiar with the chords. I'm not going to review that. I'm going to assume that you're familiar with the pentatonic that we spoke of using as an improvisational device over those chords, and that you've practiced those notes and you have some degree of dexterity and technical facility just in being able to play those notes, because if you don't, then you need to go back and just practice playing through that scale. So we have the four chords, the F minor. In this pentatonic scale, three of the notes, the F, the A flat, the C, are in this chord. So they're going to harmonize with that chord. The F and the A flat also repeat up here. It's good to know that stuff. It's good to take the time to know what you're playing. F, A flat, C, F, and A flat are all in this chord. So it makes sense they're going to harmonize with that chord when you play those notes. The B flat 7, from the pentatonic scale, it has the F, the A flat, and the B flat. Those notes are in this chord. So we see that we have these three notes in this B flat 7 chord, and also the F and the A flat. So it has those in common with the first chord, right? When we get to the third chord, the D flat also has this F and this A flat in it. So it makes sense those notes are going to harmonize with the D flat 7 chord. When we get to the C7 chord, we can even see right in the C7 chord these two notes, the C and the B flat. So those notes from the pentatonic scale are going to harmonize with the C7. So what we're seeing is that to some degree, the notes in the pentatonic scale are in these chords that we're using to varying degrees. Some chords have more than others, okay? Now when you're improvising, there's an overriding principle called, what is it? It's escaping me. Tension and release, okay? We have the notes that are in the chord, they're always going to sound good. We have the notes that aren't in the chord, those notes are what we call create the tension. But the tension is a good thing. The tension is what makes the music interesting. A lot of blues players and jazz players rely heavily, they'll intentionally play notes that don't necessarily sound all that good with the chord, but those notes create a yearning for a return to a note that is in the chord, okay? So when we're playing notes in this pentatonic scale that aren't necessarily in that chord, we're creating a degree of tension. Some notes create a greater degree of tension than others, depending on how close they are to one of the chord tones in the pentatonic. I'll give you an example. When we play the C7 chord, we said that the two notes from this pentatonic that are in the C7 are the C and this B flat. You can hear that. The pentatonic scale also has this F note in it. If we play that F note, I'm going to play the C7 chord and I'm going to play that F note on top of it. You can hear the tension that creates. Now that isn't a bad thing. The thing I need to stress is never think of tension as being a bad thing. Okay? The tension, though, wants to be resolved. That tension can be resolved predominantly in two ways. You can go to a note in the pentatonic that is in that chord, and then all of a sudden that tension is released. Or you can hold on to that tension until the chord changes back to the F minor. Now that tension is gone. So we've seen the tension released in two ways. By going to a note that is in the chord, in this case from the F back to the C, once again talking about the C7 chord, or holding on to that F note until the chord changes back to the F minor. Now all is well with the world, right? So that's one of the major principles in dealing with, and when you're talking improvisation, is that idea of tension and release. Now, going back to the chords and the pentatonic scale, we find when we're playing the F minor chord that the majority of the 5 notes, pentatonic scale 5 notes, are in this F minor chord. The 2 notes that aren't in the F minor chord are the E flat and the B flat. The reason those notes work well with the F minor is that the E flat is an extension of that F minor chord. If we were to add that E flat note to the F minor chord, we get an F minor 7. So it doesn't sound that bad, even though it's not if we just play a straight F minor chord and we play that E flat note, it sounds okay. The B flat note is not in the F minor chord. Okay? So what we want to do is be mindful of the fact that that note, that B flat note, is not in the F minor chord. So we can play that F minor note, that B flat note, but it kind of wants to resolve. It can resolve up to the C. It can resolve down to the A flat, would be the most likely choices. That's kind of going in a scale-wise motion. It can go back down to the F. That's kind of an angular motion. That's a bigger leap to get back to the home base. So if we were just to play that F minor chord, and this is an exercise that you can do yourself, record just some F minor chords, 2, 3, 4, lots of them, maybe 2 or 3 minutes worth. Think about the notes that are in the F minor chord. The F, the A flat, the C, once again the F and the A flat. And then just play those notes over the top of the F minor chord that you recorded. What you want to do while you're doing this is you want to develop a sense of what those notes sound like so that you can almost predict what those notes are going to sound like. You know that's going to sound like that. So if you do that often enough, you know that that's going to sound like that. Right? And then what you can do is you can add a rhythm to that in order to create some interest. So all of those notes that I just played were notes that are in the F minor chord. The B flat note isn't. So we want to be aware of that and resolve it. See how I resolved it? Resolved it up to the C, which is a chord tone in the F minor. Resolved it back to the A flat. You can hold on to that B flat as long as you want, and you'll just sustain the tension. Right? want to be aware of what you're doing. That's the main thing. The same with the E flat. See, I went from the E flat, creates a little bit of a tension, not a lot, because it's an extension. It can be an extension of the F minor chord. So once again, tension, release, tension, release. Not a great amount of tension because the notes don't sound that bad, but once again, it's the principle that you want to understand. That the concept of tension and release is huge when it comes to improvisation. So I'm going to make this a series of videos, and look at this one and study on it a little bit. Once again, in order to do this effectively, you have to have some facility with those notes. You don't want to have to be thinking about playing the notes. You just want to be able to play them. So make sure that you have a good facility in just playing the notes in that pentatonic. Make yourself a recording. If you can't do it, I'll make one for you, of just an F minor chord, and just tap it out. Even use a metronome if you want. It'll give you a little bit of a drum beat while you're playing. Kind of get into the groove of whatever you recorded, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then start playing over it with some understanding. Understanding that when you're playing these particular notes, they're in that chord. Understanding when you're playing this note and this note, they're not in the chord, and that they want to resolve. That's so important. It may seem very simple on the surface, but improvising can be a lot of fun, but it's a lot more fun when you understand what you're doing, and you're much less prone to make a mistake and look like a beginner that has no idea really what he's doing, that his teacher just told him, hey, play this pentatonic any old way you want and it'll sound good. Well, sometimes that works, but most of the time it doesn't. So let me know what you got out of this video, and if you understand it and if you find it helpful, because it's really important to have a good grasp on these things in order to improvise effectively. I'm going to leave it at that, and I will look forward to a Marco Polo with some feedback about this, and then we'll continue on through the chord changes and continue on with putting together a solid foundation for improvisation. Boy, that rhymes, doesn't it? So cool.